Hello and welcome to Delta College Impact. I'm Roger Waller, your host for today's program. And too often in the news now, we've been reading about the problems of violence in families, in the streets, and in schools. And today we're going to be talking with my guests about a special program here at Delta College that zeroes in on the issue of violence and the impact that it has on children and families. Joining me for today's program, I have two super guests, two members of the faculty here at Delta College. I have Pam Mekjavich and Jack Saunders. Pam is an instructor in our Family, Consumer, and Health Sciences area, and Jack's one of our counselors and has been working in this area for a number of years. And I want to welcome you both to Impact. And Pam, because you're closest to me, we always start with you. You might talk a little bit about your background and what got you interested in this issue of violence and the impact that it has on children and families.
Well, you know, I've been in the early childhood field for more years than I'd like to say, but really for the last almost 30 years. And we've been working with children, and children over the course of time have really not changed, but the issues and the real details of their lives have changed. And as I've been working with educators, early childhood caregivers, and others in the field, we're really looking at children's behavior and seeing some real changes, and knowing that the teachers really need to develop skills to work with these children and the behaviors they're showing.
And I know one of the issues is that we're working on a collaborative program, and that means that our instructional area is beginning to work a lot closer with our counseling area. And Jack, you've been involved here at Delta College in counseling for a while, but you've also had some outside counseling work as well. So you might talk about your interests and how you got linked with Pam.
Well, Roger, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I've worked in the mental health field for years. I've always been interested in the academic areas, and I've been here at Delta for about 6 years. One of the things that really brought me into this area, I've worked with Vietnam combat vets for a number of years with post-traumatic stress disorder. And when we're talking about violence in families and violence with children, in a lot of ways that's what we're talking about is post-traumatic stress disorder, which is the result of the experience of violence in families. And post-traumatic stress disorder makes it very difficult for children to concentrate, to follow developmental tasks, to develop their lives in a way that we would consider healthy and rewarding. So that, I think, has primarily led me to this field, and having the opportunity to collaborate has just been wonderful. And the Chancellor's Office at the California Community Colleges has been urging that disciplines interact with one another. A lot of times in a college setting, you'll have the sociologists over here and the chemists over there, and they work along on their own and don't really talk that much. And so this is an opportunity to really share our skills and share our resources. And it's been very rewarding so far.
And I know, Pam, one of the things is that we have a grant to help make this collaboration happen. What's involved in the grant, and how'd you get connected with it?
Well, actually, our Director of Guidance and Counseling was aware of the need that we had in the early childhood division to really focus some effort on combining.
And so one of the things, as you look at it, getting that grant gave Jack, you and Pam the opportunity to pull together this course. And in addition to the course, you're also developing other resources?
Well, we also have money in the grant to develop a library for the students to use as they study this whole area, which is an area really that hasn't gotten that much attention in the past. In fact, the program that we've developed was funded for a little while in the Bay Area. It's a sort of we borrowed a lot from this program in the Bay Area. That was San Francisco State and a couple of the community colleges in the Bay Area, working with instructors in early childhood education on the issues of violence. And one of the things that we know is that a lot of our early childhood educators have also experienced violence in their lives. And because they've experienced violence in their lives, they oftentimes have a difficult situation when they go to deal with violence with the children that they're working with and with the families that they're working with. They aren't quite sure how to respond a lot of times because they still have a lot of strong feelings and issues. And so part of the purpose of the course is to help our students deal with the issues that they have around violence. And just as an individual growing up in our culture, I think at this time, we all have strong feelings about the violence that we see around us. And so it's an opportunity to not only plan what we're going to do in an educational setting, but to deal with our own issues around violence.
Mm-hmm. And I know, Pam, you made a great comment early where you said, you know, you've been involved in this program for 30 years, basically, and if we go back to the 60s and 70s and we compare a child's environment and the family environment with today, What are some of those issues that have caused this change, and how is that family structure so dramatically different that says, hey, we should start to look at this more closely?
Well, really, when we look at this whole topic of violence, it's based on a continuum of violence, and I don't think any child really escapes it in our society today. The bottom line is that children experience violence from the media just by seeing it on television, seeing it in videos, exposed to newscasts, those kinds of things. And so it's talked about in front of them and they have to deal with it kind of point blank. They also experience it in schools. They experience it in their classrooms. They see it on the streets. They see it in their communities. And then it kind of escalates when it's actually happening in their homes. And in the United States right now, the most violent place in the United States is a child's home. Most of the domestic violence occurs in the family setting, in the home setting. So children are very much exposed to violence and feel the effects of it very dramatically.
And that's an interesting point, because Jack, you also talked about post-traumatic stress syndrome and the issue that, you know, now that they get exposed to it, even though they may cope or muddle their way through the situation, it has long-lasting impacts. And I guess we start to see it in the classroom to some degree with children as they come up through the educational system, and then their interactions with other children on the playgrounds.
Absolutely. So the whole socialization process can be stunted, and children who experience violence at an early age, because the violence can be so dramatic, they don't concentrate on other things. What they concentrate on is how to take care of themselves in this situation. And so they miss out on the other kinds of things that children would normally learn, the socialization process and stress reduction and all the kinds of things that we all learn all the time. They miss because they're focused on this horrendous situation in their life. And so it follows them throughout their lives. There's a thing called resiliency that we talk about in children, and that's a child's ability to come back from some kind of event or situation and be healthy and move on with their life and have hope. The more trauma in a child's life, the less resilient they become. You know, there are a lot of people who ask the question, well, you know, I know Johnny who grew up in a violent environment and he's fine, so we should stop coddling these other people. You know? Well, the reality is, at some point, if Johnny grew up and is doing well, at least outwardly, he probably had a few people in his life that he could go to who were nurturing, who could help him through his hard times. And I think the less opportunity children have to have that kind of experience, the more difficult it becomes. And by the time they become adults, they're not functioning well. It's really the first 7 years that our personality is formed. And if we don't have positive experiences and learn skills in those first 7 years, we tend to not gain them later on in life.
Now, Pam, I know you're involved with our early childhood education programs here at Delta, and you might want to talk a little bit about those and how this program fits in with that early childhood education system.
Well, the whole point of dealing with violence is predicated on the idea that all children need certain supports in their life, and Jack was mentioning early on, it's really critical in the critical time periods for developing relationships, for developing the ability to relate and to read emotions appropriately. And in fact, it's actually prenatal as well as during the first 2 years of life. So that our program is based on training students to work with all children and to meet their basic needs. But it's even more critical for children who have been traumatized to have a really positive, quality, nurturing, warm environment in those early years. And so our Child Development Center and the classes that we use to train students to work in the Child Development Center all need to be aware and connected to this whole issue of violence.
Now,
Awareness.
Jack, do you go in the classroom, or are you sort of a resource person that would work with the
Actually, we're
students?
team teaching the class, which makes it really exciting, and we've just finished doing an early childhood education course and writing it, getting it through the curriculum committee, and we're also doing a guidance course. And so what's going to happen in the next few semesters is we'll have an early childhood education course that will include a lot of the information that we've been talking about, but then we'll have a guidance course which will be a counseling lab. And we feel it's really important for our students to begin to practice the skills of communicating with children and families, and practice those skills in role-playing situations where they can put themselves in a situation they might possibly have in an early childhood setting where they've discovered some type of violence going on and they need to communicate about that. So that's really, it's a two-pronged program.
And so as we start to see this blending together in this organization, you talked a little bit about our Child Development Center and the opportunity of our students being exposed to those children in that 1 through 7 year age category. Now, as you start to see that socialization process, you know, do you do anything specifically in coordination with our Child Development Center or training our people in the daycare center operation to focus on that?
That's something, Roger, that we're really looking at and hoping that we'll be able to meet that need. We're also connecting with a need actually community-wide that has earmarked violence as an issue to be dealt with in terms of training for caregivers. So we definitely want to look at how we can fit this training to meet the needs of the Child Development Centers, their staff, and also the parent population of the students that attend the center.
Because I know Jack was talking about the importance of role-playing, and I guess that's one of the great things about our program here at Delta is you do have a chance of not only the role-playing within the classroom, but of the students actually being able to see and observe as students and get a sensitivity to some of those issues that they start to see.
Yeah, definitely concrete experience is the best teacher. And the students that are in our class right now, in this beginning class, represent caregivers, parents, students who are not parents yet but want to be aware, or not teachers yet but are wanting to develop the skills to be able to work with children effectively. And so they're bringing those experiences into the class, and we're using some of their actual experiences to address some of these issues.
And so if we were going to talk about people who might want to participate in this class and course down here, it really covers the gamut of not only the professionals, but of parents who are out there trying to get a better sensitivity of what they should be looking for. So one of the things, I guess, as we start to think about it, is where do we go from here? And I think that one of the things that we want to do is to start to talk about some of the specifics in the classroom. And you know what that means? That means we're coming up very close to a break, and we're going to have a break with a couple of brief public service announcements. But when we come back, we're going to talk about specifically what people would be learning in this course and some of the activities that you might want to get involved in out there as you think about participating and learning more about the impact of violence on our children and families. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after these brief public service messages.
Delta College. Delta College. Delta College. Delta College. Delta College. Register today.
Of the little lonely star. Once upon a time, the sky was very dark. There were no stars except one tiny little star.
Hi, I'm Pam Mekjavich, and I'm an early childhood instructor at Delta College. We're going to be looking at typical examples of the kinds of hands-on activities you will do as a student in the early childhood education program to prepare you for working with young children. Here, students are gaining experience in storytelling by practicing on each other before they present their stories to children. Each student chose a story to present, made the flannel figures, and wrote an outline of the story. Along with preparing stories, students in the Experiences for Young Children classes conduct science experiments, make games and toys, create a wide variety of art projects, and learn about all kinds of materials which enhance children's learning. These are active, fun courses where you have the opportunity to try out the activities children will do. You can share ideas with other students and begin forming lifetime friendships with individuals who have similar career interests.
The second little ice cream cone.
Welcome back to Delta College Impact. I'm Roger Waller, your host for today's program. And joining me on our program as we talk about the impact of violence on children and families is that famous Pam Mekjavich, who you just saw in the classroom. And we're also joined by Jack Saunders out of our counseling area. And Pam, that was a great presentation of the program. And that's part of the class that we're talking about in the early childhood education program?
Well, actually, Roger, having quality activities for children that are developmentally appropriate are really important for all children, but especially to have expressive outlets for children who have been exposed to violence or who are under a great deal of stress is real important. So flannel board stories, art, music, those kinds of things are really important to incorporate into the classroom.
And I know it really is something as we think about some of the impacts, and you go to the TV and you see a 15-year-old who is convicted of first-degree murder, you see the violence in the schools, you see all sorts of issues. And one of the things that I know you and Jack and I were talking about in the first half of the program was this grant that has allowed Delta College to develop a new course to really assist us in focusing on these issues. And Jack, as you look at this course, what are some of the expectations that you hope to achieve through this course and the impact that it might have on the students who take the course?
Well, I would really like to see our students walk away with a really solid understanding of the effects of violence. A lot of times we get desensitized to it in our everyday life. We don't recognize the effects that violence can have on us. One of the things that just amazed me, I was watching a video of an expert in the early childhood education field the other day, and he said that there are actually 250,000 assaults every month that our children are exposed to on school campuses. You know, I thought he meant 250,000 a year, maybe 250,000 every 5 years, but it was actually 250,000 a month. And so when you see the involvement of our young people in violence in their everyday, day-to-day life, we really need to recognize the importance of that. And I want our students to walk away with that and to know what to do about it. And I also want just the general public to be educated in looking at how they solve conflicts in their own life, because that's really where the key is. How we solve conflicts, how we learn to deal with conflict is going to, in great part, determine the quality of our life. And as a culture, we tend to solve conflicts with violence, and that's just not going to work for us.
And I know, Pam, so that one of the things is our viewers out there, excuse me, who might be saying, hey, I want to sign up for this course. They would go to our course schedule and they would see the course on violence and the impact on children and families. They sign up for the course, they come in, and what are some of the initial topics and activities that they're going to be involved in?
Well, one of the first things that we have to do is to raise the students' individual awareness of their own feelings about violence and get in touch with how they react and what their value system is for themselves. Most of our students have been impacted by violence in their own personal lives and maybe have not even dealt with the feelings that are connected to those events. And in order to work effectively with children, they have to get in touch with those first, resolve them, or at least raise the awareness around them so that they can react effectively with children. So that's one of the first things we do in the class. And we also ask them to kind of touch base with an understanding that different cultures, different backgrounds will approach violence differently. They will be receptive to help. They might be receptive to counseling in different ways. They have different attitudes about going outside of the family to admit that there's problems. And so we have to raise the awareness around multicultural perspectives in dealing with violence as well.
That's an interesting point as you start to think about, children in Bosnia or in the streets of a country where there's a lot of violence, that they obviously are impacted on it just as our students who might ancillarily watch TV or see it on the schoolyard, that sort of issue. And so then initially, then after that you say, Jack, take over the class, and Jack, when you get involved, and obviously you're bringing a different perspective because you're now going to be coming in from the standpoint of the counseling issue, and how do you see some of those early part of the course developing for that student? What are some of those?
Well, we'd like to do an initial assessment to see how people respond to those kinds of situations, and we do that at the beginning of the class, and at the end of the class, after we've taught communication skills, then we get to see and demonstrate to our students how, with some focused awareness of effective communication skills, they can change how they communicate. And so we go through that process. You mentioned Bosnia and some of those other places. One of the things that we emphasize in the class is the fact that in reality, our children are affected biologically by violence, in that a child who's developing when their neurons are beginning to be formed in their brain, depending upon what's happening in the life of the mother or depending upon what's happening in that child's life as far as violence goes, can actually alter the structure of the brain. And we know now from a lot of research that children who are exposed to violence behave fundamentally different if that violence continues on. And so that's not an issue that you can just go back and say, okay, we're going to do some retraining, because these children are affected physiologically for the rest of their life.
And that's an interesting point. And I guess, Pam, you indicated that the people in the classroom obviously can start to share, you know, that sort of issue of how they deal with children who have been exposed to it, if they're a child care provider, or from the standpoint of the family, how they have to try to avoid or then deal with it within their own personal situation. Now, from the standpoint of you getting involved with interactive exercises, is it pretty much of a participative type of course that you have involved?
You know, we use a lot of different strategies, and in the beginning, sometimes until we kind of create a community of learners, it's difficult for the students to share such personal issues, although it's always surprising to me how quickly they come to the point of wanting to share and actually dealing with some real personal concerns. But the part that I wanted to get back to just a little bit was the idea of the critical time periods for children, because all children, especially in early childhood, one of the basic issues is establishing security and trust. And the way in which we do that as caregivers is through responsive caregiving and forming relationships. It's like when you sell real estate, the whole idea is location, location, location. When you work with young children, the whole idea is relationships, relationships, relationships. And we talk about that in terms of attachment needs. And what are we supposed to see in a classroom that's providing security and trust and a relationship-based program for children? And so we immediately get into that area and talk about what the environment looks like, what are the strategies, the activities that students are going to be doing when they work with children, and what they should really be looking for in quality environments to support children.
That's a great point when you start to think about that. Now that really talks about the outcomes of that student. So now when they leave the class, they now can be more proactive in trying to build that relationship, establish that environment that can be very supportive in, you know, some of those issues. Jack, as you've watched this class, what are some of those successes that you're already seeing in some of the students as they've been participating in the course?
Well, I think one of the things that Pam kind of touched a little bit on is their willingness to begin to talk about their own personal experience and their willingness to look at alternatives. So we have students now who are talking about how violence has affected them and how that is affecting their child care. That's been a very positive thing.
Yeah. So one of the things is that then once they get into this sense of, gee whiz, I guess I have to become more open and start to build that relationship, then they can start to you know, develop that sort of proactive response plan on how they can avoid it also in their life and work with others who've been exposed to it. Now, what are some of the tips that you might have for people that would say, you know, just, I am now, what do I do? You know, people who've been watching this program might be saying, gee, there is a way that I can take some action. Do you have any action steps or any thoughts that might be useful for people out there?
Well, the first thing is to really be open to the child. You have to know the child well, and we always start from the base of a child development background. What's normal behavior for this child, and what is the child saying? And have you noticed any changes? Are there any ways, are they regressing? Are they now not able to do behaviors that they did maybe weeks before? How is the child responding to their environment? And then, you know, you offer support in terms of security, following routine schedules, because that really makes a child feel secure. And we look at really working through allowing the child to express whatever it is that may be of concern to them.
And so that really starts to say, now we can take that step of getting that child to open up. And then, Jack, any thoughts as far as, you know, then what should I be doing with that child? Start to establish that nurturing relationship again?
Well, yes, I think that's the case, and I think what Pam was saying really needs reiterating. It's important to know the stages that children go through in their development, how they develop physically, emotionally. And I think that parenting is probably the most important task that we undertake in our lives, and a lot of us don't know anything about parenting, other than what we experienced growing up. And to have the opportunity at a community college like Delta College to take early childhood education courses to find out what is the normal developmental sequence for children is critically important. I was fortunate when I was in graduate school to have the opportunity. I had children, and I had the opportunity to take early childhood education classes, child development classes. They helped me immeasurably with my own children. And so a community college is a tremendous resource to develop your own parenting skills and to answer those questions that you always have, you're always concerned about because you're not quite sure what to do.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, this is one of the great places to start is right here at Delta College. And I certainly want to thank Pam for joining us and Jack for joining us. And if you want to find out more about our family consumer health sciences area and our early childhood education area, you can contact Pam here at Delta College at our favorite address, 5151 Pacific Avenue here in Stockton, 95207, or give her a call at 954-5559 to find out about this new and exciting program here at Delta College that really will help to make all of our lives a lot better. So I want to certainly congratulate Pam and Jack for their pulling this course together, because that's going to be a grant that's going to pay off. And I think that's one of the things that we hope that we start to see the results here and in our families all around the area. I want to thank you all for watching and hope that you'll come back for another Impact program and learn more about the programs and activities here at Delta College. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.